candle shall shine, the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by their sorceries were all nations deceived. Neither repented they of their murders, nor of their sorceries, nor of their fornication, nor of their thefts. For without are dogs and sorcerers, and whoremongers, and murderers, and idolaters, and whosoever loveth and maketh a lie, outside the city, the New Jerusalem. But the fearful and unbelieving, and the abominable, and the murderers, and the whoremongers, and the sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. The word sorcery gives us a warning. God's requirement to give a warning. Ephesians 5:11. Take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. Ezekiel 33:8 and 9. If you do not speak to warn the wicked to turn from his ways, his blood I will require at your hand. As I first learned about this, I was satisfied. No more did I need to study. I put it aside. 5 years, didn't look at the subject, but I could share with my people that are asking questions, give them a reasonable answer. And then one day I got a call from 3ABN asking me to come and be on a panel. I think I told this a little bit last night, but it started me on being invited time and time again. I had no intentions of doing this and starting that. Had no intentions of writing a book. But things developed over time. A story I've never told in front before that I remember. As I was invited first in 1999 to go to Russia to present to all of their health educators this subject, I invited Dr. Manny Vasquez, who was vice chairman of the North American Division, and Ralph Thomas, Dr. Thomas, who was a surgeon from Chicago that was chairman of the board of 3ABN. We had been on the panel together on 3ABN prior, to go with me there. Now, as I prepared over this, I had about 6 months' time to prepare. As I prepared, I had all of the writings of E.G. White on this subject that I could find, a big stack. All of the books that expose it, written by Christian authors, and every verse in the Bible that had any relevance. I would go through these and say, yes, this is true. And then something began to work into my mind that says, no, you shouldn't do this. You'll create problems. I had invited one man that had been over there doing this to come. Oh, he put me down in no way. He says, I used to see black and white. Now I see gray, and so forth. And he was actually promoting these things he had once exposed. He was the doctor of Loma Linda. And so that shook me up. And here I was, the country doctor, with no credentials from the university or anything like that. Go over there. Would I create problems in the church? I've been invited by the division level, but I went through this, and it just bothered me. So I did phone up, or not phone, but I sent an email say, I'm not coming. And I got an answer back that says, oh, please come. Russia needs this. So I talked to Dr. Thompson, and he says, let's go. 5 times I went through that. 5 times. And about 6 weeks before I was to go, I was overwhelmed with it one night and decided, no way, I'm not going. I can't describe to you what I went through. I had some books I'd gotten from the library. One of them was on yoga, and I had assigned Dr. Vasquez to do certain subjects, and Dr. Thompson him, and I was taking certain other subjects. So we divided up. But I had a book on one of these other subjects, and I really knew very little about the yoga then, almost nothing. I decided to look at a couple pages in the front of the book, a couple pages in the back, and said, I'm not interested in that. Closed it, went down to the library, put it in. Came home, opened up my email, and here was a message from the health director of the division over in Nadia Ivanova of the Russian division. She says, here are some words that are in the book New Start that have been translated into Russian. Somebody's saying these words are really New Age, oughtn't to be in there. Please give me your opinion and document it. That which was in the 2 pages I'd opened front and back was my documentation of this question. And a shock went down through my spine. I says, I've had an answer. I'm going. Lord, I'll go. And that I've not told to a public before. But that's what got me going, and I've continued ever since. I said at the time, I'll go for 5 people, I'll go for whatever number you want. And I've had as many as 700, 800 at a time. I've had as many as 4 or 5. And I think I was given a job. It was a small job. But as I look back over the years now, 25 years or so, many countries. This book has gone into at least 30 countries. Africa, India, China, all of these places. I've been to many countries myself. It's had an impact. There are others doing this work too, and sometime back 5 of us got together because we thought we were the only ones doing it. And we were losing ground. It was moving into the church faster than when we started. So we got together to form a group, and we have a website together. I've put at least $50,000 in that website. That when I check out, I'll still be around to bug you on that part. But it has 2,700 pages of information. It has about the books, the various ones. It covers most of the subjects. And that I've done on my own for that purpose. The God gave me the ability to do it. I hired it done because I don't know how to do it. But I spent a whole year just putting the material together that went into it. I have another website, and you'll find them on your church website, the addresses for these. And in it, you can take the chapters of my book, bring them up, and actually print them out in PDF copies. So for years, I gave free books. At the end of these sessions, I would hand out free books. Many thousands. Finally, economically, I decided the last group I bought just recently were $15 a piece. They had been $10, so I said, well, I think I'm stopping. So you're the first group that I don't have free books to offer. But if anybody wants an electronic copy, give me your address, your email address, and I'll send you an electronic copy. Or you can do through the website, on your church website. So there, my intent, I've never made a dime. I've only lost thousands of dollars in the project. I've never come even close to any equal terms. God has made it possible that I could do this. It's kind of a little more difficult now, so I'm changing, if you don't mind, on there. But it's on Amazon. It's been there. On the books are. This book, Exposing Spiritualistic Practices and Healing, was the second book. The first book, and this has everything in it. The first book, I just simply enlarged it. It had a large appendix that has very important information in it. And it was written for the Adventist church. A lot of spirit prophecy. I did another book that was written for the non-Adventist that took all the spirit prophecy quotations out. It's called Alternative and Mystical Healing Therapies. Are they medically sound and spiritually safe? That's a separate book, but it comes out of here, the exact same words, but much is removed of certain quotations, and I do not mention the church and so forth. This one has a history of our health message. It's just a tremendous amount of material. You can't imagine. It took me 3 years just to write it on there. So I say this because you will not remember everything I've said, and if you want to get the same material and a lot more, it's simple. If you have electronic internet connections. Let's get through with this here. We want to get on a bit into the reflexology. If we dealt with that, we'll not do it again. Treatment based on astrological concepts, correspondence, association, and sympathy. We're going to look a little more here. Now, long ago, when babies were born, they might have some physical defect. And they would make a lot out of this and try to tell the future and so forth. And eventually we got into the hand, reading the hand, the palm reading, the chiromancy, it is called. And this divination of this nature tended to grow in time. And you could tell all sorts of things from the hand. I was in Krakow, Poland. And there on the street was this lady with her regalia and reading the palms of people. The first time I'd actually seen it done. But on the hand and the places of the body, they were supposed to be able to find certain spots that would tell everything about the rest of the body. 8 localized body zones. There's supposedly 18 of these locations. Webbed between the thumb there, on the teeth and the tongue, so forth. Looking for something that foretells the future about health and well-being. And in the Newsweek, it seems to be one of these magazines that promotes these things, the new science of mind and body. We're looking now at somatic therapies, something that's done to the body. We have a great list of them. I've simply outlined in yellow 1, reflexology, CRANIO-SACRAL therapy 2, and 3, REIKI. I want to deal with those. Many other names there. Once upon a time, there was a dictionary on the internet called the New Age Dictionary, and it listed 4,200 different therapies. And it had a little paragraph about each one. And it went off the internet, and I've never been able to find it. But it gives you how broad, worldwide this concept is of these. And all of them were in the occultic beliefs. So let's look a little bit more here, see which one comes up first. We showed you that picture a bit ago. We'll not waste time. This one is in the old medical office I worked at when I first started practicing in my town. Now it's a whole office promoting these things. I moved out and was in a different office for several years. Now going back in 1913, William Fitzgerald, a medical doctor, an ear, nose, throat specialist back in, I think it was in Boston area, someplace in Massachusetts. He was a follower of Swedenborg. Swedenborg was a Swedish man that was a world-renowned spiritualist and led the beliefs of spiritualism nearly 200 years. He was the great man for that. He wrote his own Bible, or took the Bible and translated it his way. A spirit guide told him to do that. He was a brilliant man as a miner, engineer, so forth. But Dr. Fitzgerald was a believer in him. He believed in the Eastern doctrines, those things we've been teaching about, this cosmic spirit. And so he was looking for some way to do surgery on the head and neck without a general anesthetic of ether. And so he was looking at these pressure points. He believed in some of the concepts we've been doing. And eventually, evidently, the Spirit worked with him, and he could do some things without the anesthesia and without pain. And so he went further and began to proceed to form a map of the whole body with the correspondence that on this side of the body would be 5 different zones, and on this side, 5 zones, 10 altogether. This was his concept, and that they had a connection with organs of the body, the brain, and so forth in such a way that manipulating the pressure, so forth, on different parts of the hand or on the bottom of the feet would affect different organs, bringing correct movement. Again, based in the Eastern dogma of all the other aspects. Well, it was not accepted by the medical profession in his area. There was one physician, I guess, that got a little involved, but the lay people grabbed hold of it, made them a healer. And so we go back, and this lady, Eunice Ingham, American, made it popular in the country. It eventually got over to England, and a lady by the name of Doreen Bailey called it reflexology. And so that name has stuck. And this started in 1913, has moved through the country, and the concept is you can feel and massage the fingers or the palm of the hand or the bottom of the foot and affect to healing or so forth other organs of the body. Now, it's never been shown to function or to work scientifically in any sense of the word. But that became very popular, not with the medical profession. They saw no sense in it. And it's based in the same dogma that the universal energy flowing through. When I read his book, He didn't have any of that till the very end of the book, and then it picked up. He was definitely into the Eastern concept of thought and brought this about. But this has been very, very popular through the Adventist Church for a long time. Let's go ahead with it a little more. Reflexology works on 3 levels: the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. And this was by Bergson, a person writing a book on that. And what does Dr. Lindsay Bergson believe this spiritual aspect to be? She says, a healing force from the universe is called upon and used by both the client and the practitioner. Now, when I first ran into this is where these women's ministry at this Beaverton church, their women's ministry were giving this Sunday afternoon episode, 3 things, and this is one being taught. One of the ones teaching it in the New Age Dictionary, her name is there as being the one propagating it most in the United States. Amazing. But this was women's ministry. See how it worked? And these were devout people. I'm sure Pastor probably even knows some if I gave the names. Nurses on that part. Believing in it. And she had, my first introduction, she gave me a book about it. And she was saying, well, there are crystals in around the nerves down here, and you're softening the crystals. That's never been shown to be so. And if it did, how is that going to affect someplace else in my body? It makes no practical sense physiologically, nerve-wise, any other way. But it's popular and it's believed in. Let's proceed. A hand reflexology, but most of it's done on the feet. It adheres to a circulating, it says that there's a cosmic body force, the chi, the prana, the life force, and reflexology and acupuncture are related as they are based on the same principle, life force, universal energy. Massage to the foot activates life force, body disorders, imbalance of cosmic vibrations, air of life. This is by Mildred Carter in her book, Hand Reflexology. Air of life, creative substance of all matter, as it contains essence of the universe. These things were not, the ones even practicing had no clue about this background, and yet are promoting them, you see. They would be shocked. And I corresponded a little bit, but was not accepted. It was my sharing with them. There's a picture of the so-called diagrams that are supposed to tell us what parts of the body or the foot or the hand will affect elsewhere, and the internal organs. Putting it to the test. Going now down to Loma Linda, Dr. William Jarvis, PhD, is a teacher of researchers. He teaches doctors how to set up research programs. He was not an Adventist, but he is wide known throughout North America as a leading expert in exposing bogus things. And so he, in teaching his class of these doctors that were going to be researchers, he dealt with the reflexology. He had a reflexologist come in and explain the philosophy upon which they worked. And then he says, let's design a test to test this reflexologist and his theories. So what they did, they took 70 people that had known diseases, disorders, diagnosed, solid diagnosis. They brought them in, they laid them on a table, they covered a sheet over them, their face, and they would say no voice, only their feet stuck out. Now the reflexologist was to test them and feel their feet and find out which ones had disease, which didn't, what disease. And when they got all through, it was a total sham. There was no better than wild guessing as to accuracy. Now the reflexologist recognized that it didn't work, so he still continued to do foot massaging, which is fine, but he didn't preach the other aspects of his vision. And this I got off the internet, but this came from Loma Linda University. There have been many other exams of this. All of them fail. It just is not there, period. But very popular. And doesn't mean that sometimes somebody didn't get better from something, because there can be power. But the question is, where did the power come from? All right, now let's go to phrenology. Have you ever heard of phrenology? Mrs. White said that phrenology, psychology, and mesmerism were the devil's spiritualist things to manipulate at her day, but it would be the same power at the end of time that dealt with other things. Now, phrenology is where, back in the 1800s, the concept came that if you feel the head and certain bumps and so forth, you can tell a variety of things about this person. You can actually put pressure on those areas, change personality, so forth. That was a popular thing. I read in one book about the old Battle Creek College that on Saturday night the students get together and they would practice this on each other. That was part of their entertainment. Amazing how that got going. But that came about from a doctor, and we'll look at it better. She said here this: I was directed to this scripture as especially applying to the modern spiritualism, Colossians 2:8. Beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the tradition of men and the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ. Thousands, I was shown, have been spoiled through the philosophy of phrenology and animal magnetism. Animal magnetism, same as chi, as prana, vital energy, so forth, and have been driven into infidelity. If the mind commences to run in this channel, it is almost sure to lose its balance and be controlled by a demon. Thousands are conversing with and receiving instruction from the demon God and acting according to his teaching. The world, which is supposed to be benefited so much by phrenology and animal magnetism, never was so corrupt. Satan uses these very things to destroy virtue and lay the foundation of spiritualism. So phrenology was feeling the bumps and making predictions. There's a picture showing you all these little brain. The head was divided into these little sections, and how pressures on those parts would change certain functionings of your body. And here's a picture showing a lady getting one of those domes put on her head that put pressure in those. You choose which spots to screw the bolt down and put pressure. And here's a more modern one on that part. And I believe out of this came the CRANIO-SACRAL therapy, that which, Pastor, was being practiced there that you were speaking about, that brought the problem up in the conference. Because I've read that the same man that eventually brought about the CRANIO-SACRAL concept of feeling here, early years of the 1900s, he would wrap belts around the head and tighten them and see the symptoms that come. Some people would get nausea, others it didn't bother, and venting. And then finally, in the 1930s, he came forth with this CRANIO-SACRAL, the idea that the circulation of spinal fluid and brain fluid was the cause of all disease, and by gentle pressure in certain places you could resolve it. I had a nephew that went and got a treatment from there. He had a bad shoulder. He felt, they put the hand on the shoulder, and all sorts of warmth went down through his body. He came home, and his dad informed him where he had been and what he had gotten, which was his only treatment. He stopped. But there was power there. Things happened, and things did get well. Getting well isn't the proof. Not at all. The originator, Dr. Sutherland, he was an osteopath. Therapy presented to the public in 1929. The concept was that the brain has this rhythmic motion resulting in a motion of the skull bones, and they don't move. They're solid. Up about 2 years of age, they become solid, which is detected. Says he could detect by the fingers and by there, and he knew then that the fluid was not functioning proper. That was just out of his mind. This came and people followed it, became prominent to the osteopathic profession. Theory: that disease is a result of improper circulation of this fluid, and freeing the restrictions of the flow would result in healing, but it didn't. Correction of flow is accomplished by gentle pressing on the skull with fingertips. Now, I'm sure 100% of you would doubt that pressing on or touching my skull affects at all the fluid inside. There's too much in between the skull and so forth. Just, of course, doesn't work. But Dr. Sutherland, eventually he discovered that he didn't need to be touching there, that there was a power within that produced the same results and could be achieved without the use of external forces. This power he named breath of life. Thereafter, his therapy focus was with spiritual reverence. No question about being spiritualism. Now let's turn to REIKI. Reiki is close to the sacral cranial, but you don't need to touch. It actually has its origin out of Tibet. The modern history of it is that it came out of Tibet, went to Japan, came from Japan to the United States. And in this is where people have to be attuned into or join in, they get initiated into the occult to be a part of it. And so there's level 1 of attunement, initiation to receive and transmit. They don't need to touch, and they don't need to diagnose, because you're channeling energy out of the sky, out of the universe, that comes through them and out through their fingers, and they can treat you at a distance, whether you want it or not. Level 2 and 3 in a Reiki master gives attunements. 15 years ago, when I first wrote this, at that time there were 1.5 million number 3 level people in the United States. I don't know how many million now. Very popular. Yes? You were one of them? So this lady says she was one of them. Have I said anything incorrect? She says no. All right. I always want to know, because I don't want to give error. I'm there. Now, 2 years ago, 4 years ago, I think I was at Spirit Lake Church. And after the session, a gentleman came to me and he says, I'm going to tell you a story and you're free to use it in your sessions. He says, my aunt was in the hospital here recently, and the nurse was finishing the care for her, and then the nurse began to put her hands about her in a strange, holding him for maybe 5 minutes at a place and moving and so forth, and didn't ask any permission or so forth. He says, I don't know what it was, but I didn't feel right. I closed my eyes, began to pray. And suddenly the nurse said, can't do it. They won't let me. And the patient wakes up. She says, those 2 men there, which the patient couldn't see, won't let me do it. 2 angels. I was down in Santa Cruz, presented a couple times a seminar in Santa Cruz Church in California. And there the local hospital had mandated all nurses take a Reiki training. The person that had invited me down, the health educator for the church, was a nurse there. So she was bothered with this. She took the little bit of information I had, put it on the email, sent it to the administrator. They canceled the orders. And I had very little information, really. But this is a powerful, deep subject. The people that are doing it, the one reading I have says they could see ghosts, other personages or angels, dark angels behind them, and fire would come out of their fingers. You know more about it than I do. I've never seen it, never done it, or been involved, but this lady says she had that experience of being were you level 3? So she says she was at level 3, and the more you do it, the deeper it comes. And this is more information. Very interesting. Thank you. I was asked especially to go to Canada because the health educator at that camp meeting, her father was into this and doing it. And he sat on the front row, but I didn't penetrate. No way. And this is a problem. If I get to people before they get involved, the devil's influence is not over them. But once they're, it angers people to hear that. Eric Wilson, he said as he went to the Adventist church, people would come, through the years would try to warn him and so forth. He says it made me angry. I forget something in his course. He eventually saw through it that it was the deep, deep devil things in his martial arts that turned him around. And he saw, because when he and I were down at Hayden Lake, they wanted us to go to a certain lady that was in Coeur d'Alene promoting a whole lot of things. She was coming to church there, and a lot of the church was involved, and the pastor, and she had machines that they were believing in and all of this. The pastor wanted us to go down and talk to her, and Eric says it's not going to work. They don't approach it that way. And we left there because it turned back. And after I left there, they sent me a video that she had, talking about things, and it was good up till the end, and she was promoting to be sure and learn how to talk in tongues. And that really sealed it. I wrote back to them, no, have no part on this. And there were certain machines being used and so forth that people were believing in. It was about splitting the church at that time. Okay, we need to move along. So, let's finish the Reiki there. It's transmitting energy, it's not balancing. This is different. It's taking the energy, supposedly, energy out of the cosmos and transmitting it, and it will take care of everything, the diagnosis and so forth. You don't have to do anything on there, according to what I read about it. And you can do it by mind, and this is shamanistic in nature, connecting with the spirit world. At that time, 1.5 million practitioners, very popular, because there's power there, isn't there? Yes. Reiki is not directed by the practitioner, and in this way it is very different from other vibrational or bioenergetic modalities, such as therapeutic touch or Qigong. Those treatments are more similar to medical interventions in that practitioners evaluate the patient, devise a treatment plan. Reiki needs no diagnosis because the flow of subtle healing vibration is spontaneous, drawn by the recipient. The practitioner simply places her hands on the recipient for first-degree treatment or makes the connection for distant healing at second-degree level, and then the practitioner becomes a completely passive conduit of the vibration to be drawn by the person receiving the healing. There is a picture of putting, I think, correct me, the hands would be placed in a particular position, maybe 5 minutes, and then another place, a number of maybe an hour's treatment all together, 2-3 times a week, so forth, on that type of thing. All right? The resonance healing or vibrational medicine is rapidly gaining clients. The book that I have written by a medical doctor on vibrational medicine, Dr. Gerber, is the book. But he tells at the beginning of this 650-page book, most of this book was channeled. The information in it was channeled by Spirit. So it gives you know what we're dealing with. And he says the machines are electronic pendulums. That's what he calls them. And as I got to reading through his book, he was getting into physics, and I've been 65 years, I think, since I was in a physics class. I said, wow, I began to sweat. Maybe I've written some wrong things in my book. Wow. I mean, I really was in trouble. But a few more sentences, he had me as a god. Oh, I said, someplace in here he got off of real physics. I'm safe. I haven't written an error. This was a real experience. And, it's a long time since I sat in Dr. Brown's physics class at Walla Walla. All right. Anyway, the mental and the emotional effects of these healing approaches are being recognized as our model of humans as multidimensional beings, expands beyond the physical. In addition, many of these complementary medicine approaches are being used to support spiritual emergence. And Ellen White says, satanic agents claim to cure disease. They attribute their power to electricity, to magnetism, or the so-called sympathetic remedies, while in truth they are but channels for Satan's electric currents. By this means he casts his spell over the bodies and souls of men. We are coming right upon a time when Satan is at work with all manner of bewitching influence. And those who are charmed with them now, or give them the least countenance now, will be all ready to be swept right in to act a part with the devil then. Pretty important comment. We can lose eternal life by not willing to turn from them. We need not be deceived. Wonderful scenes with which Satan will be closely connected will soon take place. God's word declares that Satan will work miracles. He will make people sick, and then will suddenly remove from them his satanic power. These works of apparent healing will bring Seventh-day Adventists to the test. Many who have had great light will fail to walk in the light because they have not become one with Christ. Trust in the Creator God to sustain us. That was picture of my first book. And there was the second. The second was simply an enlargement of the first. But that's enough of that. I do want to do through the essential oils, and then we'll quit. I have a number of other presentations, but there's a limit to how much. And you have access to the internet and to the websites. And if those that wanted, we had books out. It used to be that, how do you deal with books on Sabbath? And that's why I started giving them instead of selling them. And that was a good feeling. People now said, hey, he's not here to sell a book on that part. And I liked it, but it eventually got expensive on that part.